Hi, I'm Mike Potter, and I'd like to welcome you to the True Wealth Financial Show, a show dedicated to providing you the information and inspiration to navigate financial decisions, intentionally build wealth, and retire with confidence. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Additionally, you can find more information and resources on our website at truewealth.show. And now, let's get on to this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the True Wealth Show. As always, I'm glad you've taken the time to tune in. Great job on investing in your financial future. Over the last couple episodes, we've been talking about money management, the importance of it, the use of it in financial frameworks, the benefits of having a budget or a spending plan. 2 weeks ago, we talked about basic budgeting. And last week, we talked about budgeting for big events such as Christmas. Today, I want to talk about a couple of advanced budgeting tactics or techniques. While basic budgeting is great for getting started, it's not fully functional in terms of application or usability. In today's episode, I want to talk about distributed budgeting, tracking of expenses, making the adjustments when things happen, and some techniques and tactics to help you with those that have an irregular income. We talked about in the basic budgeting episode about the 3 steps of creating a budget or a spending plan. Step number 1 was to forecast your income. Step number 2 was to allocate for expenses. Step number 3 was to allocate until zero base, meaning that income minus expenses equals zero. Every dollar had a job and had a starting position in the plan. But there's really a 4th step, and the 4th step is to distribute the budget. What is distribute the budget? Distributing the budget adds a new dynamic to the budget. While basic budgeting looks at the whole month in general, that's not really how most people get paid. Most people get paid either weekly or bi-weekly, or maybe twice a month, like the 1st and the 15th. If you're one of those people who get paid one time a month, obviously that makes it easier. Next week, we'll talk about the non-budgeting budgeting system where you can simulate the reality of getting paid one time a month. But for now, we're going to talk about distributing the budget. It's essentially subdividing how much each paycheck and expense you're going to allocate to one specific time. This primarily deals with the timing or the when of the budget. The basicing budget deals with who and how much. The distributing aspect adds the when to it. Throughout the month, you have to constantly balance this money that's coming in and that money that's going out. We often refer to that as cash flow. How this looks practically is that you simply take the amount of your income and you break it up into chunks as to when it's going to come in. And you do the same thing for expenses. You take the amount that you're going to spend, but you give it a timing element. It could come out of one paycheck, or you might have to save up and it could come out of multiple. Let's look at a couple of notional examples of how this works practically. So this is a notional example of how to make a distributed budget. This individual or couple makes $3,200 a month. But again, the distributed budget has to do with the timing of it. In this case, this individual couple gets paid every week. In this month that they're doing their budget for, there are 4 months. We simply took the amount that they have and we distributed it based upon each paycheck. For each paycheck, they get $800 per paycheck, totaling $3,200 for the month. We basically divided it up and we distributed it over the month of when they get their paychecks. Okay, they're going to do some giving first. This couple is going to give $320 for the month. Well, again, distributed budget deals with the timing of it. When are they going to give it? They're going to give $80 from each paycheck. And so we can see for this paycheck, paycheck 1, there's $800 coming in. We have allocated $80 of that paycheck, and we have $720 left to go. Okay, the next thing is on their basic budget, they allocated $400 for food. now we're going to say, okay, when are we going to spend that? Well, they're going to take $200 from their first paycheck and $200 from their third paycheck to distribute that $400 across the month. And we can see that the balances now for those individual paychecks go down. Okay, their electric bill. Their electric bill is going to be due maybe around the 7th of the month. If their bill is due on the 7th of the month, they can't use their paychecks that come later in the month. They have to use their first paycheck to allocate towards their electric bill. And so again, we see that the money from this specific paycheck goes down. Okay, their mortgage. Their mortgage is $1,400. Nowhere do they make enough money from one paycheck to cover the entire mortgage. What they have to do is they have to allocate certain portions of money from the two paychecks, in this case, $700 from paycheck number 2 and $700 from paycheck 4, so they have the money to pay the mortgage that is due on the first of the month. And again, now the balances come down respectively. Okay, their auto loan. Let's say their auto loan is maybe due the 25th of the month. They're going to take $300, allocate $300 from paycheck 1. They're just going to leave it in the checking account. And then $250 from paycheck 3, again, just leave it in the checking account. And then they're going to pay the bill either by making the payment online, setting up bill pay, writing a check, debit card. Again, the balances come down. So now they have their cell phone. Their cell phone was $380. Maybe it's due towards the end of the month. They're going to allocate $70 from paycheck 1, $20 from paycheck 2, $270 from 3, and $20 from 4 to then have the money to pay the cell phone bill. And again, the balances come down accordingly. We can see now that we have distributed all of the months. This part here was their basic budget for the month. But now they have a distributed budget, so they know exactly when they're going to get paid. When they get paid for paycheck 1, they know exactly what they're going to do with it. They're going to give $80. They're going to take out $200 for groceries. They're going to pay their electric bill. They're going to leave in their account $300 for auto loan and $70 for the cell phone. And they have a plan for each paycheck for the month. Again, this distributes it based upon the timing of it. So now I want to show you that same notional example, but this time inside of the distributed budgeting forms. Again, you can find these forms at truewealth.show on the resources page. Click on the distributed budgeting forms. So this couple again makes $3,200. We've already put in their giving, their groceries, their mortgage, their electric bill, their cell phone bill, and their car payment. And we can see that they've already done a good job of creating a zero-based budget. Income minus outgo equals 0. Now, when it comes to the distributing part, there's another tab on here called the distributed budget that brings over all that information. At the top, we can see here that we have the paychecks. For example, in this month, when they're doing their budget, they get paid on the 4th, the 11th, the 18th, and the 25th, 4 times a month. They have a total income of $3,200. They get paid $800 each paycheck. We can simply distribute it. What we did was we took the amount that they're going to make and we aligned it based upon when they're going to get it. In this case, on the 4th. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the expenses. They said, okay, they have $320 they want to allocate towards giving. They're going to do $80 a month. And what happens is, as we put that in here, we see 2 changes. Number 1, for this paycheck, think this column, we now have only $720 left to allocate because we've already allocated $80. And again, on the horizontal row, we said we want to have a total of $320. We've allocated $80. We got $240 to go. So as we continue to distribute those expenses, we can see that we have everything allocated for that expense. And again, all the balances came down. Their mortgage, they were going to take $700 from their second paycheck and $700 from their 4th paycheck. Again, the balances came down and we have nothing to allocate. Their electricity bill, they're going to pay in the beginning of the month. Again, I think it was due on the 7th. Again, this shows you can't use the paycheck from the 11th or the 18th or the 25th to pay a bill that was due on the 7th. We have to use our first paycheck, right? Verizon was due late in the month, I think on the 25th, and they want to allocate a little bit from each paycheck. So they're going to take $70 from paycheck 1, $20 from paycheck 2, 270 from 3, and 20. Again, just leaving all of these amounts in the checking account to pay the bill that was due on the 25th once they get paid. Groceries, they were going to take out $200 from the first and $200 from the third of the paycheck. And the last thing I believe that we had was the car loan. For the car loan, they were going to take $300 from the first paycheck and $250 from the third paycheck, and it's balanced out. Now we can see that we have allocated for all of our expenses, and we know exactly when they're going to pay, and we've allocated for every dollar from each paycheck. What this becomes now, this becomes the complete game plan for the month. Exactly when you're going to get paid and exactly what you're going to do with it. Exactly when you're going to get paid and exactly what you're going to do with it. This will give you complete control over where the money's coming from, where it's going, and when it's going there. And that's how we distribute the budget. Ideally, everything is balanced out. And when it does, you have the perfect starting plan for every dollar for the month, how much it's going, to whom, and when it's going to go there. Now you just have to simply follow the plan, which then brings us to tracking. Tracking is the idea of aligning monies received or spent to a budget category. It helps you stay on track how much you've actually spent. There's a lot of different ways this can be done. I have a friend who lives in Omaha. Him and his wife have a spreadsheet that they've had probably for 25 years if they still do it. I'm sure they did. I know they did it for at least for their first 20 years of their marriage. And they had a spreadsheet of every dollar they've ever spent as a couple. They basically would bring home their receipts, and every couple of days, one of them would sit down and add the expense to their spreadsheet for every month, which would total up to every year. A lot of people use apps to do this. Next week, we'll address a couple of those apps. But for now, I want to show you in the spreadsheets that can be found at truewealth.show/resources of how to actually capture and track your expenses throughout the month. So here I want to illustrate how to potentially use the distributed budgeting forms for tracking your actual expenses as well. Again, here's our basic budgeting form. On the second tab, there's a monthly tracking. And what this does essentially is pulls over a lot of that information, and it has all the categories that we've allocated money to and how much. And then there are essentially 31 days potentially for a month. This is how we use this. Essentially, this couple, it says they're going to give $320. We have the distributed budget form. They get paid on the 4th. Maybe the 6th is a Sunday, and at church, they have then give $80, right? And same thing, again, on the 12th, they give $80. Every time they go to church, and we can see here's how much they actually spent. That then flows back to here on our basic budgeting form. We can see this is what we've allocated and here's what we've actually spent. If you keep track of all this, you take some time to enter, maybe one time a week, it'll give you the feedback for what you actually spend that next month, and you can use that to project the following month. Let's pick another category here to show you how this works. Let's go down to groceries. They've allocated $400 for groceries. Again, they get paid on the 4th. Maybe they go to the ATM because they're using the envelope system and they take out $200 for the 4th. And again, they get paid on the 18th. They go to the ATM and they put on another $100 for their groceries. We can see now they budget $400 and they've actually spent $400 on groceries. This becomes a great tool for tracking your actual spent, which again carries back over to here where you can get some feedback as to how much you have remaining and or if you're going to go over or under, and then you can use that feedback for the next month. Now this brings us to making adjustments. As we started, your basic budget, or even now your distributed budget, is a starting plan. But it doesn't necessarily mean that's how everything's going to go. If you think about budgeting every month like a car journey, where you're starting and where you're trying to get to and the turns in the route along the way. But sometimes there's some unforeseen things that occur. You have to make a detour. You might have to get off the interstate. You might have to make some U-turns. And what happens when you do that if you're following your GPS? Every time you get off the initial track, your GPS recalculates and helps you figure out a new path. But that GPS has to know where you're at. And that's why tracking is important, because if where you're at, you can actually begin to start to make adjustments. If you remember, the whole idea of these budgets is that they're zero-based, which means if you overspend in an area, you're putting yourself at risk of either overdrafting your account or possibly bouncing a check if you still write some checks. Most people don't, but occasionally some people do. If you've overspent in one category, that means you're going to have to make some adjustments where something else is going to have to go down. Or conversely, where you thought something would cost this much, but it costs less. Well, now that you have an extra amount that you can reallocate to something else. Let's look at a couple examples of how you can practically do that in these spreadsheets. Again, here using the distributed budgeting forms to illustrate the idea of overspending and or making some adjustments. In this case, let's say, for example, we already have taken out our $400 for groceries, but we realize towards the end of the month that we have a problem, and we go to the store and we spend $25 on groceries. Well, obviously now we've gone over. We can see that we only allocated $400 from our budget, but we actually spent $425. It's a zero-based budget, which means if something went up, something else has to go down. This has to now become $425 because we can't overspend. Well, when we do that, we have a problem because now we're $25 in the hole. We essentially are spending more than we're bringing in. Something has to change. If one category goes up, something else has to go down. Maybe this couple makes the decision that they are going to change their giving for the month to only $295 as an example. Because they overspent here, this has to come down. And now again, we are budgeted. Income minus outgo equals zero. This provides you again some feedback as to how to make adjustments throughout the month. One last tactic or technique that I want to address in this episode is that of irregular income. There are a handful of people who have irregular income due to maybe owning a business, being in sales, getting bonuses, and thus it makes it a little bit harder to forecast your income. Again, next week, we'll talk about the non-budgeting budgeting system. In the future, I'll show you how business owners can use a framework to systematize their income to make it more stable and consistent. But for now, I want to give you a couple of simple ideas of how you can go about systematizing your budget if you have irregular income. Let's assume, for example, that you maybe have a base plus commission. You get a base of a certain amount of dollar amount, and you have extra income that fluctuates throughout the month. The idea is that you budget off of your known income coming in first, and then have a second prioritized plan for any additional monies that might come in. Let's say, for example, you have a base of maybe $2,000. We know that that money's coming in. Every month, you're going to get that $2,000. And if you look back at the last 6 months of all your income from your commissions, you see that it goes up and down and it has a variety, but your lowest month was $2,500. We have $2,000 and $2,500. We put those together and we have now $4,500. What we do is we set up our regular budget, basic budget and distributed budget off of that $4,500 because we have a high level of confidence that that money's actually going to come in. Which then says, okay, what do you do with the rest of the money? Well, here we have a prioritized list. What we do is we make another list of all the potential things that we want to spend money on. Maybe we want to do some extra giving. We put giving 10%. Maybe we want to do a little bit of savings, $500. Maybe we're saving up for some new furniture. Maybe we want to buy more clothing. We list all those things out, and you make the list longer than the money's going to come in. So you have a what you want to spend it on and a dollar amount with it. And then you reprioritize the list. If you can only do one thing on the list because you only get a little bit extra money, what's the one thing? What's the second thing you want to do? And you reprioritize the list. Now you have a prioritized list from 1 to N things with the most pressing and important being at the top, essentially kind of giving you 2 budgets. Then as money comes in, you first execute your normal budget. And then if money comes in above that $4,500, you use the prioritized spending list to then allocate money towards those different things until the money runs out. Conversely, another way to handle irregular income, a technique or tactic, if you will, is to utilize a hill and valley account, which kind of acts like some float. When you have months where you have excess money coming in, you put money into that account. That's the hill part. And then when you have down months, you make less than what you kind of normally need, you pull money from that account. That's the valley aspect. This is better illustrated visually. Let me do an illustration on my iPad. To illustrate the hill and valley, the idea, again, is that you have some irregular income coming in. Let's say this is month 1, this is month 2, this is month 3, month 4, month 5, etc. The income goes up and down irregularly. Somebody, what they could do here is they could baseline their expenses, their budget, if you will, of a certain dollar amount. Let's say $4,500 in this example. And then what we have is we have what's called a hill and valley account, a separate account. And the idea is in some months when we have more than we need, here, for example, what we do is we would put that money into that excess, the things above the baseline that we're spending, we would put the money in there. And then in the down months, like here and here, for example, we would basically pull the money out and bring us up to our baseline there. Again, when we have excess months, money would go in. Other months, money would come out. Money would go in, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes a hill and valley. The idea is that this here acts as a float, this account, and over time might get big or small or whatever. But you normalize you have a baseline for your expenses, and you use that account to augment you take out the hills and the valleys to flatten it out. That's the idea of a hill and valley account. Today, we talked about some advanced budgeting techniques. We talked about distributing a budget. We talked about tracking. We talked about adjusting, and we talked about some techniques to deal with irregular income. So your micro action for the week, start doing a distributed budget and track your expenses. Eric and I did a distributed budget for well over 10 years before we moved on to utilization of some applications. Our kids can kind of remember the idea that on our refrigerator for many, many years, we would have that distributed budgeting form, one very similar to what I have on truewealth.show on the resources page, and we would put it on the refrigerator with a magnet. And it helped us be conscious of what we're doing with our money throughout the month. Next week, we'll talk about a couple of other tactics and techniques and technology that you can utilize with budgeting or having a spending plan. I hope this helps you on your financial journey. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below, or you can send me an email to mike@truewealth.show, mike@truewealth.show. I'll try to respond to every email I get there. And until next time, I hope you have a great day. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this week's episode of The True Wealth Show. I encourage you to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Please feel free to visit www.truewealth.show for more information and resources. One final note as we wrap up today's show. While I hope the information you've been provided has been insightful and valuable for you, it's really for information and educational purposes only. Prior to making any decisions or taking any actions, I'd strongly encourage you to reach out and talk to your legal, tax, estate, or financial advisor who's familiar with the unique circumstances of your situation. Thanks again for taking the time to watch it. Hope you have a great day.